Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tom Worth Jr. Today I wanted to talk about JD Vance getting slapped down again for his lack of understanding of things, this time by no less than Pope Francis himself. This is an exchange that took place a few weeks ago. I just came across it today. Vance trying to use Christian doctrine, Catholic doctrine, to justify the Trump administration's very, very unchristian, very un-American, very inhuman treatment of immigrants, refugees, other, and it most certainly does not justify what this America First movement does. JD Vance became Catholic 4.5 years ago. Pope Francis has been the Pope for 12 years. Before that, he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires for 15 years. He was a cardinal in the church for 12 years before that. And worked his way up. This is a man who has spent his entire life studying Christianity, studying doctrine, studying theology, living in Buenos Aires, and even as Pope, just 100% focused on taking care of those most in need. And his focus is largely on immigrants. I'm glancing at my phone here, I did just a quick AI summary of him, and it gets it pretty right, just a really high level of Pope Francis. It says his papacy has been defined by themes of mercy, poverty, and joy. And that describes him to a T. Specifically, he's been more focused than other popes on the environment and on refugees and immigrants, because he's in Italy and he sees migrants coming across from Africa on little rafts where they will sink, and tens of people, dozens of people or more will drown. And this happened early on in his papacy, and the bodies washed up on the shore of the nearest part of Italy. This is just something near and dear to his heart, and you can imagine why when this election was going on, other popes, if they chime in at all, they never endorse a candidate, but they always take the anti-abortion stance. And he did not do that this time. He mentions abortion, but he said also, but the other candidate is not good either, because their policies would not consider immigrants and poor people, and so he's not good either. So we don't endorse anyone, but we're certainly not endorsing anyone this time around. So really dislikes the Trump administration. And then you have JD Vance. Recall over the weekend when, I think it was Friday, he lectured EU leaders who know way more about everything he was talking about than he ever could, and comes in and says what he says. You know the guy just thinks he's God's intellectual gift to humanity. He has no business addressing these people. He doesn't know anything. He has no experience. Well, when he chimed in a few weeks ago on this little bit of doctrine called Ordo. Let me look this up again. It's the Order of Love. Ordo Amoris, and this is the ordering of love. The right ordering of love. And he cites a guy named St. Augustine, who lived around the 400s. And it was in the Roman Empire, and we had barbarian hordes attacking them, and he wrote things, and he was a theologian. He just a giant of the church, an intellectual and doctrinal giant. And he wrote about loving your family and loving everyone, and Your love should be ordered. You should, but he was talking in context of you need to not love things that you ought not love. Because in his own life, again, we're talking about a dude in 400 AD. He, as a young man, he fell prey to all sorts of vices, including women, and prostitutes, and just really going down the wrong path. And then he corrected and became what he became. But Thomas Aquinas came along 800 years later and took that and said, well, we need to make sure we prioritize what we are loving and how we are loving. Just got a little more specific about it. JD Vance took that and he cited St. Augustine, and he cited this Ordo Amoris. And he said what it says is that you need to love first your family, and then your neighborhood, your community, and then your country. And that's the justification of America first. And that is not what it says at all. Is J.D. Vance just sitting there lying, but citing St. Augustine in this Latin term to make everyone think he's smart? And Pope Francis himself, in a letter to U.S. bishops, I took a snippet of this, if you'll indulge me for a moment here. He said, in his letter, he said, Christian love is not a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups. The true Ordo Amoris that must be promoted is that which we discover by meditating constantly on the parable of the Good Samaritan, that is, by meditating on the love that builds a fraternity open to all without exception. This is him just slapping down what Vance promotes and espouses. He had a more detailed statement than that in his letter, but that just encapsulates him saying, without calling him out by name, that this guy is not speaking the truth. This guy is not talking about the Christianity that he understands through a lifetime of studying it and living it. This is there's a cardinal over there in Rome, American cardinal, and he addresses too. He was just interviewed on the street by a Catholic reporter that I saw, and he was talking about specifically the cut to the aid agencies, because the Catholic charity organization Caritas International, they said, was the second largest human aid agency in the world. So this guy knows something about aiding people in need, poor people, disenfranchised people, immigrants, refugees, sick people, all these people. And what he said was, and this word kind of triggered me, and I didn't realize I had just been kind of numb to it all along. But what he said, this cardinal, was that, I got the exact quote, he said, a crackdown is a terrible way to administer affairs, much less to administer justice. Obvious, right? A crackdown. Where do you hear the term crackdown? You hear it with Nazis, right? You hear it with fascists. You hear it with police states. You hear it about China. You heard it about the Soviet Union. You heard it in East Germany. There's a crackdown. Do you ever hear this about good organizations? Organizations that are doing good. Organizations that exist for people. Is there a crackdown? No, but all of this time we've kind of been, I don't know, just desensitized to the term crackdown. All the time Trump and all his mouthpieces have always mentioned we're going to have a crackdown on immigrants, with the deportations. We're going to have a crackdown on this or that. That's just not a term that like the guy said, it's a terrible way. He used the word terrible. It's a terrible way to administer things. And he was so upset because he specifically said, look, countries have the right to spend their money and direct their aid and their efforts towards whatever ends they wish. That is their prerogative. He's not criticizing the United States for not helping people. He is saying this crackdown, because what this crackdown is, and this is what Elon Musk always does too, when he takes over companies, and a country in this case. He said, in the case of human aid, what we have are people, human beings, dependent on aid that countries have agreed to provide, that companies have committed to. And to crack down on that and suddenly freeze it, that is a terrible way to administer any program, especially one to do with human rights or human aid. And he's exactly right. There is no lawfulness to this crackdown. These are commitments that were already made by our government. The I don't know. When you see the Catholic Church, and they're not going to name names, they're not saying JD Vance, they're not saying Donald Trump, but there is no mistake about who they're talking about with the words they use. And they're good at this. These are people who are turning against not the United States, but against this administration. And as some of you know, the Heritage Foundation is populated with plenty of Catholic, whatever. I hate to use the term thinkers, but plenty of Catholic instruments, or I think they're Catholic in name only, because if they had an understanding of the religion, of the message, and I know a lot of you aren't religious, but this is all based on the life and teachings of Jesus 2,000 years ago. And he would never be for anything that they are advocating, that they're implementing. Never. He was always about being all-inclusive. He would not be for the tearing down of diversity and equity and inclusion programs. He would not be for the denial of people's own identities. He would not be for locking people up and sending them off to prison or shipping them back to their own countries. None of these things are things that the historical Jesus would have been okay with. But these people they just profit off of his name. And again, just like with the MAGA movement itself, it preys upon the ignorance of the bulk of humanity, really. These people, they can't synthesize their own experiences and their own learnings and come to the proper conclusions. So they are susceptible to whatever anyone tells them. And if it's on their TV channel, then that's what they will believe is the truth, rather than simply using their own brain. I started this channel as a former conservative, a former Republican. My thinking evolved, and the people who are still in that camp, which is more than half of the voters in this past U.S. election, the thinking is not evolving, and it will not evolve as long as Fox News is around anyway, or any outlet that carries Trump's thoughts and Vance's proclamations. Vance is particularly galling to me because he is an educated person, and he does know what to say to sound smart and make their followers think he's smart. A family member of mine, kind of extended family, just loves JD Vance, and she's one of the best people I know, and just a heart just overflowing with love and giving, even though she doesn't really have anything to give, forgiving of everything, and she loves JD Vance, just thinks he's the best, he's the greatest, and she's as Catholic as they come, and she, like I said, she's as loving as they come, and it is just an ignorance of what they're actually doing. She's not a Fox News junkie. so she doesn't see. But even if she was, she wouldn't know what they're actually doing. She just doesn't pay attention to the news. So all she knows is he's this great guy who seemingly came from nothing. She came across his movie, the kind of autobiographical thing that was based on his book. I just thought that was such a great story. And I mean, what do you do with a person like that? I can't sit there and argue with her. I'm not going to. I will never change her mind. She wouldn't argue anyway. She'd just say, okay, I didn't know that. But it's not going to change anything. And there are just so many people in America who are like that. And then there's the real dirt bags as well, the racists, the white supremacists, the misogynists, all those people, the xenophobes. But it's just such a, it's crazy what a broad coalition he has amassed for this movement, based on ignorance, based on hate, based on love of America and patriotism, based on evangelicals. I mean, I honestly don't see how it has been accomplished, because it's been going on for like 10 years now. And everyone has had all the time in the world to figure him out. And they just won't. But Pope Francis has. And the cardinal I watched has. And I love when they call him out. But, I don't think Pope Francis has the best name across the whole Catholic Church, because he is so inclusive. He is so loving, and he's about as close to the teachings of Jesus as any recent pope has been. The pope before him, Pope Benedict, I loved him a lot too. He had a tough guy image, but he was the real intellectual in the church. And he really studied all this stuff, and he knew all the history, what the failings were, what the things that were right were, and he worked to correct those things. Before him was Pope John Paul II, who was there forever and did as much towards the fall of communism as Reagan did, really, starting in Poland, but really as a beacon for all of those communists who weren't allowed to have religion in their countries. They're all different. All of these popes are, and this particular one, he's not a lot of what the last two were that people loved so much. All he is a guy who loves everyone, who is compassionate, who has empathy, who wants to help everyone. But you just boil it down, that is Pope Francis. He cares about people, the most needy among us, and he cares about the environment, because he knows that this is the world we have to live on. I don't know. I just like what the guy has to say most of the time, and I know his heart's in the right place, and I know it is very much against this administration, and I love that about him. That's what I'm hanging on to here, is things that align with my beliefs, and going against Donald Trump and everything they're trying to do. But I'm rapidly starting, Elon Musk was I was kind of starting to hate Musk more than I do Trump, and lately Vance has been more the object of my scorn. But it's really just all of them. It's just this rogues gallery of terrible people. Some of you got my Dylan Thomas quote yesterday. Renee certainly did. Raging Against the Dying Light. He actually wrote that about his own dying father, who he didn't want to give up fighting to stay alive. His dad did pass away. But I was meaning it more in terms of the raging against the dying light of our democracy itself. And what he wanted from his father was, yes, you have this insurmountable obstacle, you have no hope, you have nothing, but still don't go quietly into that good night. Rage against the dying light. And that's what we all need to do here with democracy itself, is just keep raging against it. I do think we have some hope, although it doesn't always feel that way. But we need to keep fighting, even when it seems like there's really no point in fighting. So hopefully we can keep doing that, keep staying informed, keep staying passionate, keep staying outraged, and keep taking care of each other, because that's the one thing that Trump and his people are taking away, is our ability and our desire to care for one another and to help one another. So really, that's probably the biggest thing we can do to thwart them, is just keep helping each other and keep caring about each other. So keep doing that, and we will talk tomorrow. Okay.